Knowify is an all-in-one cloud-based project management tool built for construction contractors. This complete video guide will cover how to set up your Knowify account, as well as how to set up your jobs and manage them using all of Knowify's project management features. If you would like to skip to a specific part of Knowify, you can use the index in the description of this video, or you can view the other videos that we have recorded in our YouTube channel. When you first sign up for a trial of Knowify, you will receive an email link that will pull you to this Start Now screen. Clicking Start Now will bring you to step 1. This is where you would import your data from QuickBooks if you're going to be working with QuickBooks Online as your accounting solution, but in this video we'll just cover the insides of Knowify. We'll get started in step 2. The company name automatically carries over for when you signed up for the trial, and we'll enter our address here. It should automatically suggest when you start typing an address, and I'll also upload a logo for any document output from Knowify. This way, Knowify can put your logo on any proposals, invoices, or other different documents that you generate in your system. It'll also prompt for things like our state license number, our company phone number, and if necessary our website. This can also be input into your documents, and if you don't see it automatically, just put in a request with our support team and we're happy to customize this for you. In step 3, you're asked to describe your business. This is so we know to automatically enable a couple different features in your account, but you'll always be able to edit this information later. You can note if you're a trade or specialty contractor, such as a plumbing, electrical, or HVAC, or you can mark if you're a residential contractor, maybe doing remodeling or custom home building, or any other kind of contractor. In this account, I'm going to mark trade or specialty contractor. It's going to ask if we do a mix of both service as well as full-scale construction work. This will enable the Service Jobs module in Knowify. I'm going to say we do a mix. And then it's also going to ask if you ever need to use AIA-style invoice documents. I'm going to enable this in the account as well. We have tools to automatically build the AIA forms, which are great time savers if you need to build those for your client. And step 4 is going to be optional. This is just so our customer support team can get a better idea of what you're looking for, so we know what to offer you when we go through our training sessions. In step 5, we'll be creating our users in the Knowify account. I'm going to add a couple different options here. You'll see we automatically generate one for you, and we name it after the company. If you click on the user here, you can actually adjust this. I'm going to go ahead and put in my own name here. And I'm going to adjust my email. Go ahead and add plus demo here. If you're using Google, you'll still be able to receive emails at this address. And then I'm going to make sure all of my permissions are turned on. Now this will save the user for later on when I log in, but I'm also going to add another user. We have different types of access available in Knowify where they can have full access, mobile access, or no access for each user. I'm going to start by adding a user with regular or full access to Knowify. We'll need to fill out all the information in this form, starting with the user's first name. And I'm pretty fond of the Beatles, so I usually try to use their names when I'm setting this up. I'm going to just generate a fake email here. You actually don't need to use actual email addresses since you can manually set passwords for each employee. You only need to use an actual email address if you need them to receive emails from Knowify, maybe regarding proposals or translating information around project phases being completed. We do a lot of automated emails, but I'll go ahead and just set a list of permissions for Paul here. Maybe he's in charge of client agreements like our contracts and invoices. And you see this automatically turns on other features that need to be locked in if they manage client agreements, such as the ability to view client and vendor financial data. But in this situation, I'm going to set him up to track his time as well as track other employees' time and approve their time cards. He's also going to have the ability to schedule and manage projects. And when I hit Add User, if this is a real email address, it'll email Paul and let him know that he's been invited to join our account. Now I'm going to add a user with mobile access to Knowify only. This will be for our smartphone app for field technicians, so they can add their time and purchases, comments, images, everything like that to the jobs in Knowify. I'm going to continue on my Beatles streak here. And now I'm going to assign a different role to this user. I called Paul a project manager. This is just so I can later on build a budget by using specific roles as opposed to resources. So I could say, in this situation, tradesman, or in Paul's case, project manager. And you see that since this is a mobile user, I only have the two options: to track their time and to be a foreman and track other people's time. So I'm just going to enable these. Oop, and this actually blocked me from being able to add the user because I gave limited approval authority, but no direct manager to approve anything above the $100 that I set. So I'm going to go ahead and add this user. I'm actually going to have them set to me for approval here. So it'll email me if this user tries to enter a purchase for over $100. When I add a user with no access to Knowify, it doesn't need an email because this user won't be logging in at any point in time. This is just so other users can enter their time for them, so we can still do things like manage all of their job costs of the project. And true to their name, the no access users don't actually access anything in Knowify. They're just in the system for the sake of labor tracking. They'll still print on payroll sheets, but this way you don't need to pay for a full access user for everyone that you put on payroll. That'll be good for now, just me and the Beatles, and I'll go ahead and go to the next step where I'm going to set up the labor rates for each of these employees. This is how we apply labor cost to a job in Knowify. You fill out this card for each employee and we'll generate an hourly cost. So whenever they submit their time, it's going to use this rate times the number of hours that they were on the project to show you the real-time labor cost. I'm only going to fill out the basics here. We don't have to get into too much detail. In the column on the far right that says hour rate is where we're going to actually be adding the cost to the job, but you can fill out other information around benefits, taxes, insurance, workman's comp. I see I set myself to yearly and $50 a year. I'm going to go ahead and fix that one to $50 an hour. And I'll fill out a little bit more of this information just so you can see how this changes the hourly rate on the right. And I'll plug in some union wages, and other is really just for overhead, any other factor you want to plug in here. And now I'm set to $67.60 per hour, and that's how we'll be costed to jobs here. You can also select which employees are eligible to receive overtime. This will be for your reporting. You can set it up as either daily or weekly, and choose at what hours we actually start applying overtime. So I'll set mine to daily. We also have the option for never, for what it's worth, but I'll set my overtime to daily. I'll say you get time and a half after 8 hours, double time after 10 hours, and I'll set Saturdays and Sundays both to 0, so they get double time on any weekend hours they submit. Then at the bottom you can go to the Roles and Applicable Rates tab. This is where you set the billing and budget rate for each role in your account. The difference is that in your billing rate, you are setting the default price that you charge your client per hour if you ever do time and materials work. It can always be edited per project or per invoice, but this is just where we set the default. And the budget rate is going to be for when you're estimating projects. So I could say, for instance, tradesmen we budget at $25 an hour. So if I put in 10 hours, it'll make it $250 as my labor budget. And all of this information will be editable later on. The last step of setup is really just more information for our team in case we want to reach out to you. We do offer a 50% discount off of your first month if you do a training session with our customer success team. And these fields just let us know, how you prefer to be contacted and when you prefer to be contacted, so we can give you a call or an email and try to schedule in that appointment. I'll just plug in a bunch of my information here and finalize setup. And Knowify will prompt me for a new password, so I don't need to use the crazy one that we auto-generate for you when you sign up for your trial. And now I have my account set up. And I won't be saving my password for this account. Once we complete setup, we'll see this apprentice checklist. This is really just a list of things we recommend you do while you're setting up your account, but they're not all necessary, they're just suggestions. What I'm going to walk through next is the admin section. You get there by clicking the button in the top right corner and go into admin section. And you'll see a bunch of tabs of different settings to apply to your account. And a lot of this is similar to what we set up in the previous setup screen. For instance, the company information around company name, your address, and this is also where we can include hours of operation. They'll control things such as our scheduling calendar and whether or not we show Saturdays and Sundays there. To change a day, you just click the day in the list on the right. You change the hours, click edit, and we'll automatically shift to the next day. I'm going to go ahead and go Friday or Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. and I'll save these changes. This is also where you would set any currency changes in case you're not a US based account. We do support a variety of different other currencies. The structure tab is just so you can divide the company into teams or departments or anything like that for organization purposes. It's not necessary. You can always choose no particular structure. It won't do anything negative to your account. And then users is where we'll edit any of the users that we set up or add new ones. You can see they pulled in from earlier, but again, I can always add another user here. We won't bother with that for now. And to edit a user, you just click on the user. Let's say I don't want to give Paul full approval authority. Let's go ahead and set him to $10,000. Oh, and again, got to make sure I set a direct manager. If he's going to have limited approval authority, he has to go by me. But next we'll get into our equipment tab. This is where you can add resources to the company that maybe aren't employees. So I can put in a description. I'll add an excavator to my company. His role is being an excavator. And we'll be able to track all of this very similarly to our users with no access to Knowify. And then we can also pull up our rates tab, just like we had earlier. I'm going to go ahead and set a rate to my excavator here. Just so whenever we add hours for the excavator, it adds $80 an hour to our project. The Customize tab allows us to turn on and off a bunch of different features that are available in Knowify, as well as make changes such as our company logo and some other options. The Custom Templates tab is really just letting you know that we do customize any of the outputs in Knowify. I'll mention this a lot, and you can watch a video on it here, but we do recommend you reach out if you are interested in having a more custom setup. Numbering is where I set where my purchase order and invoice numbering starts in Knowify. So if you already have a purchase order and invoicing system that you use, this is just to make sure your numbering stays on track. I'll just start mine a little bit further along. This is also where you can enable AIA style invoicing. We had it turned on in our initial setup, but you can turn it on here as well or turn it back off if you don't end up using it. This scheduling feature is actually so you don't need to require scheduling in Time Tracker. You never really need to schedule, but it'll just pull up every job when you go to enter time. The other important ones here are like service jobs, where you can turn on and off the service jobs module from your system. Again, this is enabled from setup, but this is where you can turn it off if you don't want it anymore. A lot of these features are very specific to each case, so if you have questions on any of them, just reach out to support at Knowify and we'll give you more info. The tax rate section is where you set up the different sales tax rates that you charge to your clients, or if necessary, add to your expenses. I'll go ahead and just add New Jersey sales tax here. I believe it's at 7%. And I'll put in a New York tax as well, which is a 8.725, I believe. That may be wrong, but it doesn't matter. It's just for the sake of document output in this example. The default section is going to be for when we send out emails or when you include terms and conditions in your contracts. You can set up a list here so you don't need to retype this information or recustomize for every contract you use. I'm going to just put some quick nonsense in my terms and conditions so you can see how this is going to work later on when we are building a proposal. Just generate some lorem ipsum. None of this really matters. It's just fake text for the sake of filling gaps. So I'll just paste those paragraphs in here and save this for our terms when we're creating contracts. And just to show you how the email defaults work, this is going to be for when I'm sending an email out of Knowify. If I don't want it to say thank you by default and I want it to say sincerely or something like that, this way when I'm sending out an invoice, it'll automatically write in sincerely instead. Just some time savers here. The integrations tab is to connect to other softwares like Permit Zone or T-Sheets, and tags are going to be for organizing your jobs. We'll get into that more later maybe. Now, the Documents tab is going to be for any documents that I want to send out through Knowify more often, and I don't want to have to search through my file database every time. So when I'm sending emails, I can just reference these. And QuickBooks is just going to be so I can connect to a QuickBooks account. Again, we won't be using that too much here. This audit log is just a bunch of different actions that were performed, who performed them, and what time, just in case you ever need to see what was going on in your account. And when you're ready to activate your Knowify account, or if you need to change your subscription, you do it in this subscription tab here. You'll see a breakdown of different information about your subscription, such as your plan. I'm on Plus. It's coming in at $88 a month. and clicking see details will break that down for me. I can see I'm on a base subscription plus 2 additional no access users for $2, so it's 86 plus 2 gives me my $88 a month. In case you weren't aware, we do offer a 20% discount on yearly accounts. And clicking view payments will see all of our charges so far. And the activate now button will be where I can subscribe to Knowify or enter promotion codes or update my subscription at any point in time. Lastly, if you need to cancel your subscription, obviously we hope you never do, but the button is right here in this same tab. That's all we'll cover in admin section. I'm going to go ahead and hit back in the top left corner, and it brings me back to my getting started screen. Now we've got the account roughly set up, but I want to add a little bit of data into the account, and we'll start with our clients. I'm going to add a couple clients into my Knowify here. You can see right now the database is empty. I'm going to start by adding a new client. Anytime you add something new to Knowify, button's in the top left corner. I'll go ahead and click here. First it prompts you for a client name. That's actually the bare minimum of what you need when you're adding a client. Everything else is just optional for your reference and for a little bit more functionality throughout Knowify. I'll add this client as just a person. Let's say it's a residential type of client. In that situation, the client and contact information is the same. And I can use the address lookup to reference Google Maps and fill in the rest of the information. I'll put in some contact info like the client's phone number and email address. This is not a real phone number, just so you know. And I'll go ahead and just make up a company for my friend Ron Swanson. And you can include notes and other information if ever necessary. And then when I hit submit, it adds this client to the database. Now I'm going to add a different kind of client here. This will be for when we're working under a GC or a bigger company as opposed to direct to the client. I'll call this Very Good Construction, and I'll put in the office address here. And maybe Ron actually works at Very Good Construction. This is the difference between adding a client that's a residential, a homeowner versus a company. I can put in his work email as opposed to his personal email. And this is just going to be how we differentiate here. Can just fill out the rest of the info here. Another phone number. And I'll go ahead and submit this client as well. Aside from just adding individual clients, if there's more than one person you contact at the client, you can actually click their name and put in more info. So like if I want to add Ron's wife, Tammy, I can put in her name, her email address, and her phone number. That way, when I'm sending out anything to the client, it'll actually prompt us to select whether we want to send to the main client or this additional contact. And then kind of off of that, we also have the ability to add sub-customers to each of your customers. So I'll use Very Good Construction as an example here. If I do a variety of different projects with them and they label each one as a different client, I'm going to bill it differently. I can actually put the information in here, so I'll call this the Very Good Construction Project 123 Avenue A, and I'll say that this is a sub-client of Very Good Construction. So that way I could still set it up where the client is 123 Avenue A, but it can be billed all the way up to Very Good Construction if necessary. And you can see that it's showing under Very Good Construction the other customer, which is 123 Avenue A. So that's always an option as well. And then if you ever need to edit a client, this box on the right with the pencil in it pulls up the add feature set again. This is also where you can make a client inactive if you're not going to end up using them. And then you can click show inactive if you need to bring them back. Just go ahead and edit again, and you click make active. Next we can get into adding vendors. It's a very similar process. You'll notice that a lot of it's more or less exactly the same. I'll say add new vendor. I can plug in the vendor company name. Let's add Woodhaven Lumberyard. And again, I can add more contact info. At the very minimum, you just need the name. Everything else is just for kind of automating processes like sending out purchase orders and outputting information onto documents. I'll just fill out the rest of this info here. And I'll go ahead and hit submit to add this to my vendor database. Now I'm going to add a different kind of vendor here. Aside from people that we're buying materials from, vendors can also include any subcontractors that we ever need to hire. So I'm going to go ahead and add Pete's Plumbing here. This could be my plumbing contractor, and I'll throw in his contact info as well. Maybe you're not sending out purchase orders per se to this type of vendor, but if you have a work order, if you're going to need to hire Pete's Plumbing for a project, you can email the work order right to them as well. And the last option, kind of similar to subcontractor, will be a 1099 vendor if you have an hourly contractor that works with you. I'll use my example of Carl Craftsman here, who we hire for some of our projects, but he's not a full-time employee. I hit this is a sub or 1099 vendor. I can choose what type of role he gets, and then this will actually be a user with no access to my account. I can also add him as a user with mobile access only if I want, but this is just going to be for the sake of me tracking time for him. And then also, just like clients, I can edit a vendor, and then if necessary make them inactive, so they will not come up from my vendor database, and I can show inactive and make them active again. Now that I have my clients and vendors added to Knowify, next I'm going to set up my catalog of products and services. The catalog is where I'm going to add my list of different products that I purchase for all of my projects, as well as any services that I offer to clients. So I'm going to start by adding a product in this situation. This is where we would add something like, I'm going to use my classic example here of wire. So I'll put in the product name, and this can be as detailed as you want it to be. It's really just going to be for the sake of putting into budgets, putting on our different purchase orders, and I can put in additional information like a description. Maybe I just go high level with the name, and then I can get more detailed in the description. This will be carried over onto proposals and stuff like that if I ever need to use this direct without including it on a phase. I'll go ahead and throw in the same description, extended description. I can give this item a tag as well. This is going to be for if I need to search the database, if I want to sort them out a little bit more easily. The price that I put in here is going to be the price that I would charge the client if this isn't part of a budget, if I'm directly selling it, or if I'm putting it right on a contract. But the cost is the more important part. This is how much I spend on the item or how much I want to budget that I'm going to spend on the item. That way I can mark it up later. And I'll put an item number in as well for the vendor to see when I send out a purchase order. I can edit this at any point by clicking on the item and making changes. And it's always going to be adjustable as far as the price and everything goes for future projects. I'll go ahead and add a service here as well. Rather than this being a product that I purchase, this is going to be something that I provide, like a electrical inspection in this example. Again, I'm going to put in a description here, and the default scope of work is going to be a description that we pass along to our guys in the field, or also that I'm going to put on a contract. It's just so I don't have to retype this information every time. And I'll be able to tag these as well, so I'm going to go ahead and throw that on. And then I can also put in the typical price that I provide this service for when I'm billing the client. I'll call this $150, for example. The last item that I'll cover in the catalog is going to be how to add service templates. This is one of Knowify's budgeting tools that we set up. And we start by just adding a standard service. But you want to hit this box on the right that says this is a template. This is going to let me put together an assembly of different products and labor hours that I'm going to need for a specific service that I provide to a client, and it's going to be based off of a number of units. So I'll start by adding it very similarly to what I did in just adding a standard service. Put in my name, description, an extended description to present to the client and my team in the field. And I'm just going to put some random nonsense in here. Go ahead and give it a tag again. But now this is where the template comes into play, and you can actually watch a video on specifically this by clicking the link there. But I'm going to choose a unit for this template. So let's say I budget for every foot. I have a default price per foot, very similar to what I saw earlier in my standard services, where if I'm just going to directly put this on the contract, I say we charge $7 per foot. But what I'm going to be doing here next is putting in how much I budget for labor per foot. And in this situation, I'm just going to use one role. I'll call it a tradesman. I'll say each foot of this service takes 10 minutes. This way I can actually use this later on, write in the number of feet, and Knowify will take care of all the budgeting for me. Same thing goes for materials. I can use that wire item that I used earlier. Obviously we need 1 foot of wire for every 1 foot we're installing. And then I could put in the amount of subs per foot, if I want to create a subcontractor budget. But now I have a template that I can use for estimating aside from using it to quote pricing. And now that I have my catalog, all of my clients, vendors, my account set up, I'm going to go to my contract jobs module and we're going to start putting a job in the system. And I just populated a bunch of jobs in my account from earlier just so you can see a little bit more about what this is going to look like when all of your jobs are underway. The Manage Contract Job screen is kind of like a home base in Knowify. So I could see all my different open projects, I could see how profitable they are, and a quick breakdown of cost and revenue. And it actually shows all the different statuses of my jobs. I can organize by bidding, out for signature, maybe it's still a potential lead. And hitting show history will show me any jobs that I've closed, so ones I worked on in the past. But I'm going to get started by hitting the Add New Contract Job in the top left corner. So it'll ask me for a name first, and you see that it suggests a job name. If you number your project names, Knowify will automatically suggest the next number, so you don't need to keep track of this manually. And I pulled in a bunch of clients from a QuickBooks account just so I have something to work with here. I can also add a new client here, but I'm going to use the Very Good Construction client that we set up earlier. Next is asking for what describes the job, and it's asking about our contract style, where we have the ability to set up a fixed price contract where you invoice on a percentage of completion. A fixed price with AIA billing does the same, but if you need to build AIA G702 and G703 invoice documents, Knowify will automate that for you. Cost plus will be for time and materials work or other billing styles in case you need to automatically build the invoice based off of your costs. And maintenance will be if you have a recurring appointment with a client. These contracts will actually mainly be handled in your service jobs module so you can schedule each appointment. But for this example we're going to use fixed price, our standard contract style in Knowify. Next it asks about job costing style. Basically, this is Knowify's way of asking how much detail you want out of your job costing and what flow you want to use when you're working through the project. In simple mode, we start by just building the contract and then we track the cost of the job in general. In advanced, we also start by building the contract, but we track the cost of the individual line items that we quoted to the client. And then in professional, we don't start with the contract, we start with the budget so I can estimate the cost of the job before I quote a price to the client. That's what we're going to use with this example so you can see all of our estimating tools. Every other field here is optional. For instance, I can set tags here so we can search jobs later on using these tags. So like if this is a demo job, I want to just tag that here, so in my manage screen I just type in demo. I'll set a bid due date. This is going to be for our calendar. Same with the job color, just so I can see this job a little bit more easily. I'm going to throw a Knowify orange on this one. But if you have a list of colors you use often, it'll save them here. I can also set who the sales lead and project manager of this project are. This is going to be useful for running reports later on. And then I'm going to set the job site address. I'm going to set it right to the client address, but you can also type in the address lookup to set it to a different one if necessary. In fact, for this example, I'm going to go ahead and change the address of the job site. Because the job site address doesn't need to be where the client is. So I'm going to go ahead and add 45 Broadway. And I cannot find this address is in case the address isn't showing up correctly or if it doesn't exist yet, you can just mark it on a map. And we'll go ahead and save this job. Now that the job is added to Knowify, we can start building our project plan and budget for this. And if you actually have a project plan that is very similar between all of your projects, that's what this click here to use a plan from a previous job button does. You save an old job as a template with this button here, and then you can just pull up all the phases so you don't need to start. We're going to go ahead and get started building this plan from scratch by clicking Add Job Phase. This is where we can start adding individual budgets within our project plan. I'll call the first phase of this job Site Prep and Demolition. And I'll start writing in my budgets. Starting with materials, I have the ability to just write in a lump sum. I'll say $2,000 in materials, And you see this adjusts the total budget of the job and the material budget at the highest level. And I can also enable labor to start putting in my labor budget. You don't actually need to enable labor on every phase, only ones you want to track labor to. So if you want to have several phases for material costing and only one for labor, it's actually very common and it'll actually make it easier so less shows up on your mobile app. I'll see it increases all of my budgets at the top. And I'll enable a sub for this phase as well. This is going to be if we're hiring a subcontractor on a lump sum contract to help us with this phase of the job. So now we have the budget at the top of the screen for the overall project, and on the right you can see the estimated cost of this individual phase. But next I'll add another phase so you can see a little bit more about our detailed budgeting tools. We're going to go ahead and call this one framing and rough carpentry. And you can see it pulls up suggestions. This is from my catalog of different services, just so we can keep a consistent naming basis for all of our different phases. But when I create my materials budget for this phase, I'm going to click the Add Materials button. This way, instead of me just writing in a dollar figure, I can start writing in the different materials I'm going to need. And I populated a bunch of extra products in my catalog just to help speed up this process a little bit. So all I really have to do is add the items I'm going to need. It'll pull in that unit cost from when we set up the item, and I put in the quantity of this product that I'm going to need to order for the project, and it uses that information to build a materials budget for me. So I'll go ahead and just plug in a couple more items here. And actually, one other thing that's worth noting, if I start typing something in that isn't part of my product database, I can actually add it to the database right from here. So I'm going to throw in some of these 4x4s in this situation. They're also 8-foot studs. I can click that Add New, and I'll say that this is a new product. And you see it's very similar to the screen from earlier when we were adding a product directly to our catalog. I can put in information like tags, description. I'll throw in a price, and I'll give it a cost. And I'm just going to make them equal for this example. And here's my item number for the vendor. So now this adds it to the catalog and to the project plan just to kind of speed up the process. I'll go ahead and put in the quantity. And now I'm going to go ahead and enable labor for this phase as well, so I can put in a labor budget. But what I'm going to do differently here is hit the Add Role/Resource button. This will make it so, very similarly to what I did with materials, I can actually put in a list of different employees or different roles and how many hours, as opposed to which items and how many units. And you see we pull in the budget cost from your admin section that we set up earlier. So I could say 10 project manager hours and 80 tradesman hours, and this builds the labor budget using that information. I also have the ability to choose specific project managers and tradesmen if I want to use their hourly cost. But I always like to use the role instead, so we could see how many actual versus estimated hours for each type of employee, regardless of who ends up working on it. So that's our other way of building a budget, without having to write in dollar figures. You'll see how we get more detailed reporting out of it later on. But I'm going to add a final job phase here and use that service template that we built earlier. This is where I could just type in, wire installation. I choose it from my list. I write in the quantity of feet. Right now, it doesn't know how to make it plural, but I'll say 1,000 feet, and this will automatically pull in the number of feet of wire that I need, the number of tradesman hours, and I forgot to set a budget rate for my tradesman in this situation, but I'll go ahead and just copy it from up top. So now we just kind of speed up the entire budgeting process using these templates. You see it even pulls in that work order that we wrote in, so I don't need to manually write all of this stuff in. It just automates everything. And I can make adjustments if I need to. We're never stuck with the set pricing. So I can also do things. I'm going to go ahead and add a subcontractor budget in here as well. But that's just how service templates can speed up your budgeting process, so you don't have to write in every item one line at a time, but Knowify can actually automate the process for you. So now we have the job's estimated cost, our budget for this project, and it's broken down into materials, labor, and subs for me. And my next step is going to be creating a proposal that we send to the client. So I'll click this Create Proposal button at the top of the screen, and you see it gives me the option to use project plan phases. Technically, you don't have to do that. You can create your contract totally independently of your project plan. But when I use my project plan phases, it builds a line item of the contract for every phase of the job from earlier. And you see it starts filling in a lot of this information automatically. Some of it I can still just write in. I'll throw in the contract number. PO number is if the client sends you a PO number. You don't need to put this in, it's just for document output. I could put in information like my estimated start and end date of this project, and now I'm going to start quoting the prices to the client. And again, you can see here that we have a line item of the contract to represent each phase of the project from earlier. So all I really need to do is write in what I'm going to charge the client for this. But since we have the estimated cost from the project plan, we have the ability to just write in what we want the markup to be. The little lightning bolt will let me apply the markup to every item. And then it's going to quote the pricing for me using that information. You know, it takes the budget, adds the markup, and quotes the final price. And if we want, we can always adjust the pricing. You know, you don't have to be stuck with the exact markup. So if you want to round them off, that's always fine as well. And we can include additional information under each of these. Like if I hit the copy bill of materials from the plan, it'll pull in that list of materials. I could do the same for labor. So it shows the client a little bit more about what goes into this pricing beyond just framing for $7,700. This is also where you can include markups per each individual item of material and labor if you want to. It's not necessary, just another way to quote pricing. And this orange warning is just letting us know that we adjusted the price after writing in the markup, just so we can confirm that this is still the correct price that we want to be quoting to the client. Again, it doesn't need to match perfectly, but we want you to know that it's not the same, just in case you make a bigger adjustment there. A couple other things that are worth mentioning as far as your proposal display goes. At the top of the bill of material screen, you see this button. This actually changes whether or not we show the breakdown to the client on the actual document. And then under each item, you have a place to enter a description, so you can put more information under each of these line items. So the client doesn't just have to see site prep and demolition. They'll see the description of what goes into that $9,000 item. None of this is necessary, but if you want to provide more information to your client, this is a great way to get some more custom use out of your proposal documents. You can see one was actually pulled in automatically since I templated the wire installation phase. And if we ever need to add additional line items that weren't from the project plan, that's always an option as well. Just to go over these additional options, the output style just controls whether or not you show the price per line on the proposal. Some people just like to show the total. That's what this hide line item subtotals does. And we have two different invoice styles. I'm going to be showing you the schedule of values, but just so you can see what we have here. The standard invoice just shows each line and how much you're charging on this invoice, but the schedule of values invoice option shows the outstanding balance of each line as well, just to give the client some more information. And then I have some terms and conditions in my account from earlier. I'm going to clear these out so you can see how the defaults that we set up in our admin section work. I could just click the button at the bottom of the screen and it pulls in the list that I had put in there. I can make adjustments there if I ever need to, and this will automatically add them to the contract. Now I'm going to go ahead and preview this contract just so we can see what it looks like. And what you're seeing here is Knowify's stock proposal document. This is just a default we put on your account so you have something to use right off the bat. And you can see it pulls in information like the titles of the line items, the descriptions, bill of materials, terms and conditions. But if you ever want to change anything about the way this looks, you can actually put in a request with our team and we can customize these. And then aside from just generating the document, you can actually email it out to your client right through Knowify. You'll see that it automatically pulls in the email address that we put on file for this client. I'm going to actually send it to myself though so you can see what this looks like on the client's end. I'll go ahead and send this out, and it's going to save the project as out for signature. So this is how I can just see where the current status of this project is. But the client's then going to receive an email. It'll have some basic information. We'll put your company name on it, and they'll have a link so they can actually open up the proposal document through this Knowify e-signature portal. They don't need to have a Knowify account, it's just so they can view the document. And when they do this, it'll let you know in Knowify that the contract's been opened. And then they can accept and sign right through that same e-signature portal. I'll go ahead and sign on Ron's behalf. And they can also submit a comment to go along with their acceptance. So if they want to add anything to the proposal or give you some more info on start date, they can just respond right there. That'll be stored in your jobs logs file associated with each contract job. When the contract is signed, it will give you a notification in Knowify letting you know that the client has signed your proposal. And it will automatically switch the project from out for signature to active, as well as email you and the client a signed copy of the proposal. Now that this job is active, I'm going to open up the project plan and start tracking all of my costs to date versus the budgets that we had set up earlier. And you can see Knowify automatically adds a cost to date field, which will update as we go through. We're going to start by tracking our material costs. This is where we're going to see the benefit of putting in a list of materials for your budget as opposed to just writing in a lump sum as we did under site prep and demo. I can come to my list of items from when I was setting up my initial budget, and all I have to do is click Order Materials to start the purchasing process. It pulls up a list of the different items that I had said I was going to need and pulls me right into my Purchases module. Now I just have to write in how I'm going to be paying for this. Purchase order just means I'll receive a bill. Expense means that it was paid with cash and the transaction is closed. Flexible spending is for open contracts like subcontract work orders. And reimbursements if I'm going to get paid back. I'll choose purchase order for this example here. Next it's going to ask me for a vendor, and I'm going to use that Woodhaven Lumber vendor that I had set up earlier. And you see it automatically pulls in the list of items with their item numbers, quantities, and my estimated pricing from earlier. I can adjust quantities if I need to and make any other changes here. I can also add additional items. We can also set what the PO number is going to be, but that will auto number for you, so you shouldn't have to manually adjust. And when I submit this, aside from just adding this as part of the cost of the job, it's also going to generate a PO document for me, which I can download and actually email right to the vendor. I can put additional information in as well if I need to just write onto the PO anything that's not part of the list of items. I could say, like, please provide pricing for delivery by Monday. And then if necessary, we can actually hide pricing so they can provide a quote later on. You'll see that this just changes it so it's a list of materials. And if you had an email on file for the vendor, it would actually auto-populate here. And I'm just going to go ahead and close this screen. I don't need to send it. I Knowify also has this clipboard on the right hand side of each purchase. This is so you can mark which items were received at the site, just for good record keeping. And when you click the button on the far left, the little arrow shaped button that says View Details, it'll open up all of the additional information about this purchase in your system. This is where you can see what job it's against. You can see a quick little activity log of different things that have happened. You get to view the document that you sent to the vendor. And this list of items in the top right corner will give you some more actions for this purchase order. This is where you can also mark items as received. You can get the document. You can edit, duplicate, close, delete the purchase. Closing versus deleting just means, if it's closed, we'll keep a record. If you delete, we wipe it out entirely. And that's just how we manage any of our purchase orders that we're going to receive a bill against. And we'll cover billing in a bit, but I'm going to add a purchase now in the system that's actually just a cash or debit expense. So you can see a little bit more about how we manage things that we won't receive a bill for. I'm going to say this is with Home Depot. And this is also just how we'll enter expenses that we don't come in through the project plan. Now remember when we created the purchase order, we just chose the job, materials, and clicked order. In this situation, I just enter in, add new purchase, and all the information. And on the right, I'm actually choosing the job and the phase of the job. This way we can allocate the cost, and it automatically generates the purchase. And now you see it actually shows up in a different tab from my Manage Purchases. This is actually the View History tab in your Purchases module. This is where I can see all of my purchases regardless of whether or not they're closed or open, whereas Manage Active Purchases only shows me ones that I haven't received a bill against. I can see that this is the purchase from earlier, so I can mark the rest of the items when they're received if I need to. And the next thing we're going to manage is how to log the bill that we received from Woodhaven Lumber that they sent in response to this purchase order that we sent. So on the left hand side of the screen, I'm going to hit Bills. This is going to pull me into my Manage Bill screen where I can see all of my different outstanding bills that I need to pay to my vendors. I can see the balance and the total amount that it was for. I also get to see who the vendor was on each of these transactions and the PO number. And the checkbox on the right will allow us to record payment and do things like enter check details or a memo line. And that'll just close out that bill. And if I need to see my closed bills, I can hit Show History at the top of the screen and see any that I've logged and paid in the past. What I'm going to do is click Add New Bill. The first field it's going to ask me for is the bill document in case I have something from Woodhaven Lumber that I want to upload here. I don't have anything in my account. I'm just going to go ahead and close out of that. But then it's going to ask if I want to process this by vendor name or by PO number. So if I have the PO number, I can enter it in. It'll automatically fill out a lot of the data. Or I can just write in the vendor name, and Knowify automatically pulls in all of the things that I have outstanding with this vendor at this point in time. So all I have to do is hit the checkbox next to each of the items. This is also where I could put in the final pricing. Maybe it didn't line up perfectly with what I had in the purchase order. And I'll plug in other info from the vendor like the invoice number and the payment due date. And then when I submit this, it'll add it to my list of outstanding bills in the Manage Bills screen. And it'll also adjust the cost of the job to match. Inside this bills detail screen, we'll also have another list of different actions, similar to like we had in the purchases, where I can record payment, submit it for review. Again, I can either close or delete. Closing, again, keeps the transaction, whereas deleting will completely remove this. Or if I record that I've paid this bill, that'll automatically close it as well. And another thing worth noting, similarly to what we saw in purchases, every bills detail screen has an audit log of the different transactions that have occurred between the purchase and the bill here, and links to go back to the relevant purchase or any information there. And if I ever need to void a payment that I recorded against a bill, I could do so with the X on the right hand side of this payments list. And I'm going to go ahead and click this link, which will pull me right back into the project plan. And I can actually see my material cost increase to reflect everything that we've logged so far. You can see that it's actually organized to each specific phase. So, there are the nails that I put in as the expense for site prep. I can see more information below. And one last thing I want to show around material costing in Knowify is how to add the cost of items that you had in inventory or already on hand. That same order materials button we hit earlier has a drop down where I can choose allocate from inventory. And it'll let me search my catalog of products. So I just write in what items that I've used. I'm going to go ahead and choose a couple of these. And then I can just write in quantities, and it knows to add that as part of the cost of the project. This way I don't have to make an accounting transaction, but since I've used the materials, I want it to show me that the material cost has increased. And if I click where it says via catalog to the right hand side of any of these items, it'll pull up this very similar to our purchase details screen where I can again delete with the top right. And this will be stored actually in your purchases under the View History tab. Now that we've gone through our material costing, next I want to go into the labor costing part of Knowify. This is all managed through the hourly labor burden that we applied when we were setting up our account for each employee. And we do this by using the hours that each of them submits. So I'll open up this phase of the job, go to labor, and click enter time. This pulls me into the foreman view in my time tracker for this specific day on that specific phase. So all I need to do is start plugging in the hours that each of these employees has reported to me, and it'll use the rate to automatically adjust the job cost once submitted. But Knowify also has ways to automate this process through our smartphone app and scheduling. So I'll open up my scheduling module, and you see it zooms out onto the corporate calendar, which is our month view of all of our open projects in Knowify. This is where I can adjust the dates of jobs or add new projects to the calendar. All I have to do is click a day, write what job I want to schedule, choose the phase. It automatically sets the start date today, so all I have to do is write in the number of days. And then I'm going to add something to start on Thursday as well. Again, I'll use the same job. And I'll choose a different phase of the job here. We'll use the framing and ref carpentry. It knows to start on the 11th. And we can actually alternate between calendar days and business days if you don't want to include Saturday and Sunday. Now we have these two phases scheduled in the calendar. And if I need to move other items around, I can actually click on jobs and drag them to change their start or end date. To change just the end date, I can click at the very end of the bar in the calendar. And just the same, to change only the start date, I can click at the beginning. And you'll get a different cursor to represent that you're actually adjusting dates instead of moving the entire phase. But now we'll get into scheduling our actual crew, and that's where I click Job Board in the top of the screen. This will zoom into a week view of the calendar rather than the full month, and I can see my different projects and their open phases showing here. And to schedule my crew, I just click their names on the left, and then I click on the job on the right that I want to schedule them on. And we can either choose specific days. This is one form of scheduling, like I could say Tuesday, Wednesday, you're working on site prep. Or if I click schedule full time, it just sets up these users for every day that this phase is scheduled. Then if I need to send them a push notification, I can click the loudspeaker icon, and I can actually sort out who I'm going to be sending this to. I'll use that same crew, and all I have to do is write in what I'm going to be sending them here. Careful when you get to site, they have a mean dog. And I'll go ahead and send this, and this will give a push notification on their phone so you can notify them of something without them having to open the app. Once your employees are scheduled on a job, it makes it much easier for them to enter their time against this. I'm going to go ahead and open up the time tracker and go to the foreman view so you can see how this will automate a little bit for the foreman to enter employee time. I just type in the name of the job and what phase I want to enter against, and it'll pull up a list of who's scheduled to work on this job phase on this day. So I don't have to search through, I just have the scheduled workers pop up right off the bat. Go ahead and plug in 8 hours for each employee. And you can also enter a description of the work they did that day. I'll go ahead and just submit this for now. And so far, all of these entries we've submitted have been in lump sums, but if the employees are using the smartphone app, they can also check in and check out of the job site, and Knowify will take their location and let you know when they got there, when they left, and how close to the job site they were. I'm just going to go ahead and pull up a little simulator of my smartphone here on the right so you can get a better idea of what this is going to look like for the employee. When they're logged in, it'll show them what they're scheduled on first with just a button so they can check in when they get to the site. This will start the timer, and it'll also update in our check-in and out view so I can see if they're checked in and how close to the site they were. Here's also the notification that we sent earlier, just so you can see what that's going to look like. You can also click on the name of the job to get more details on this project and log other data. And the Find Job button at the top of the screen will pull up a list where you can search for other projects that maybe you weren't scheduled on. I'll type in our project number here. And this is going to search through our database, pull up the different phases, so I can switch and check in on different phases of the job if I need to. And I'm going to refresh the check-in and check-out view just so you can see what this will look like while people checked in during the day. I can see that on Friday, Paul, who I'm logged in as, is checked into the job site, and I can check him out if he forgot to or anything like that. But I'll go ahead and check out on the app. This pulls up a screen so they can adjust their entry if necessary and submit a comment. I'm going to go ahead and just make an adjustment, call this a, yeah, that works. So I'll do 8 hours and 30 minutes, and I'm going to submit a comment along with this. I'll just say that I forgot to check in this morning, and now I have this submitted. That makes it part of the cost of the job, and if I refresh the check-in and check-out view, I can see more information here as well. And the little red exclamation point next to the time entry just shows me that this was manually adjusted by the user, so no one can automatically adjust their time entry and pretend they were there for the full day. Now I'll go to my review time section where we submit all these different entries that have come in via manual entry or via the check-in and check-out. I can see the check-in and check-out has the time in and time out in this line. And I can also see a comment submitted that has all that info as well as the comment that they wrote when they checked out. To manage time entries in this review time section, you hit the checkbox to the left of each of them. This is how you can reject, reallocate, adjust, delete time entries, and of course approve them. When you reject time, it'll email the employee just letting them know that this time entry didn't go through. If you allocate to job, this is just a way to grab several entries and put all of them against a different job in case everyone checked in against the wrong phase or if you want to just adjust it afterwards. You also have the ability to adjust. This is actually very useful if you have lunch breaks that are mandated and you want to just adjust the entire entry at the end. You could say adjust, subtract, and then just remove whatever it may be. The half hour mandated, I just removed 30 hours instead of a half hour, but you get the idea. And actually this will be a good example. I'm going to go ahead and just delete this time entry entirely. That'll remove the record rather than rejected time entries, which will be still shown under reviewed. And then I'll just approve the rest of the time entries. And once the time entries are approved, we will add them to your payroll sheets in the time reports. And if you ever need to see your reviewed entries, both approved and rejected, you can click Show Reviewed at the top of this list. You can also look at a specific date range if that helps. And the search box in the top left lets you filter. And the button on the right lets you unapprove and adjust any time entries as well. So if you need to change a time entry that was already submitted, maybe add it to a job, this is where you'll get that option. And if you go to our time reports tab at the top of the screen, we actually, aside from our payroll report, run a variety of different layouts of time reports for your hours and labor cost. But I'll just show you real quick what the payroll report looks like. Basically, you get to choose a time range. I'll run mine from the 1st to the 14th. And this will download a spreadsheet with all of your hours broken out into who submitted them, what they were working on what day. So this way you have something to send over to your payroll provider, and it should even break out any of the overtime eligible hours as well, including double time hours too. And that's all summarized on the right hand side of the screen. And so now we've submitted a lot of hours, but obviously the other benefit of this in Knowify being that it's not just hours, but it's also our labor cost. So I'm going to open up this project plan again, and you'll see in the summary tab we have a increased cost to date, and it's actually also increasing our work in progress. This is actually a good time to bring this up as well. The work in progress revenue you see is actually just showing earned revenue based off of the value of your contract times your percentage of completion. Basically, it takes how much you've spent on the project versus what you set up as your budget or expected final cost, and it shows you how much revenue you should be invoicing based off of how far along you are. So it shows you just a more real-time profitability using all of this info. I'm going to open up Plan and Track now and just show you where we stand on this project. And you can see all of our cost to date fields versus our budgets, not just at the total job level, but broken down into the individual phase level as well. The last thing we're going to track here is subcontractor costs. In case you need to hire a sub, you see we have the green phases of site prep and demolition that we said we were going to need a sub for and set our budget to. I'll use demolition here, say select subcontractor, and it's going to ask me for who the vendor is. I'll use Pete's Plumbing. I guess they're going to be doing our demolition here. And we put in the contract value. This is the contract that we have active with Pete, and we can actually upload that file here. And Knowify automatically opens up a PO number for reference. It's actually using our same purchasers module. And if you click this View PO button, we can actually pull up that purchase order form. Only since it's set up for subcontractor, we switch out purchase order with the word work order, so you can send this out to them and let them know what they're going to be doing. You also have the option again to include additional options if you need to describe more work than just site prep and demo. And then when you receive a bill from the sub, you can log it from the detail screen just like we did earlier. But subcontractor bills can also be logged right from the project plan, where you come down to this phase and click Add Subcontractor Bill, and it automatically goes through the process of entering bills, adding a new bill, and putting in the PO number of this contract so you don't have to manually write it all in. It automatically pulls in the outstanding balance of the contract, so all you have to write in is the amount that they're billing you with this period, and any other information around the invoice number and due date. And when you submit this, it'll be added to your list of outstanding bills, just like we saw earlier with our purchase order. And since it's a bill logged against a subcontract, we'll see it logged as part of our subcontractor cost to date. And I can see more information down here. I can also add any change orders that I receive and approve from the vendor. So if I need to adjust the contract value, I can just plug it in here. And then next time I try to log a bill against this subcontract, it'll increase by the change order amount. So there was $400 outstanding, added a $400 change order. Now there's $800 outstanding. And I'll log a bill for the remaining balance, and now it's going to show me how much was spent on subcontractor fees versus my budget on this project. Now, at this point, we've logged a variety of different costs into Knowify, and we can see at the phase level our cost versus budget for each piece of the project. And any of these phases can actually be expanded into the cost versus budget for materials, labor, and subcontractor fees. And then we can always open up any of these material or labor or subcontractor subcategories to get more detailed reporting, like how many items we ordered versus how many were in the budget, have they been received, what were the purchase order numbers, have I received a bill, and you can always click those links to get more info. I also get to see how many hours were spent on each type of employee versus how many were in the budget, and how much money I spent on each of my employees that have tracked time against this project. And all this information is just updating in real time, so I know where I stand without having to run a report later on. I can just open up Plan and Track and know exactly why I came in over or under the budget I set up initially. If you would ever like to run a report to get more information that you can print out on Knowify, the project report in the top left corner of the screen will break down all of your cost versus budget information for this project into each phase, and it'll also provide a percentage of completion for you. This way I can have some more information that I can use for my progress invoicing later on. These reports will also show any materials that you've ordered and a summary of all the labor entries that have been submitted against this project as well. So far everything we've done on this project has been tracking the cost, but now I'm going to open up my contract and change orders screen to start tracking all of my revenue. Now that the contract's active, I can scroll through this list of different items that we've agreed upon and see how much has been invoiced out of all of them. Of course it's all at 0% now. This is also where I would be able to add a change order if I need to request additional funds from the client. So I'll click Add Change Order, and you see it's very similar to adding a line item with the contracts in draft and we're still building the bid. I just put in the name of the item, and then on the right I'll put in the price that I'm going to charge. And of course I can include additional details or anything like that, and we'll generate a change order document for you here. The default change order document shows information around the contract total and the new revised total post change order, but we can customize these forms for you on request just like we do with your proposals. If I hit Add Change Order while there's still a draft change order open, it'll allow me to create a multi-line change order, just in case something's more detailed than just one simple line that I'm sending to the client. For instance, I'm going to set up one change order that divides up the kitchen and foyer painting. And as long as I'm using the same CO number on both of these lines, I can actually generate one document, and you'll see that it's going to separate just like we do with lines on a proposal. This will also send as one item when I send it out for an e-signature, just so I don't have to send out separate change orders to the client for each line. I'm just going to go ahead and make this active. And you'll see that when I make one line active, it automatically makes the other line active since they're both change order number 1. If I ever need to switch back to draft, I can click Revert on that line. I'm going to add another change order here as well. And you can see that since the other previous change orders were switched to active, it automatically gives this change order number 2. And I'm just going to save this as draft to work on later and move on to invoicing. To start the invoicing process, I simply need to click where it says Invoice Now at the top of this contract and change order screen. Since this was set up as a fixed price job, it'll pull in every line item I agreed upon with the client, so all I have to do is enter the percentage of completion that I want to invoice the client for. I'll do 100% of site prep, and in fact I'm going to pull up my report from earlier and use the values that I ran for my percentage of completion based off of cost versus budget. The additional options give us the ability to include the line item description and bill of materials from the contract on the invoice, or I have the option to exclude the percentage of completion. And then I can also just set one percentage of completion for every line of the contract. And then you also have the ability to switch to dollar values in case you don't want to invoice in percentages. This will pull every line into the invoice builder. This is also where I would choose my tax rates and mark off which items are going to be taxable. I'm just not going to enter any kind of tax rates here. And when I go ahead and finalize this invoice, it'll give me the option to email this right to the client. This won't automatically send it out, but it will pull up the screen that's going to allow you to put in the final information before you send it to the client. And I'm going to download this invoice style just so you can see what this looks like. Remember I chose schedule values as our invoice format. This just breaks down the contract value in the invoice so you can give the client a little bit more information on how far along you are with the work and the outstanding balance of the contract. And then this screen will also let us customize what the invoice email that we send looks like. You may recall that we had the option to set a default here earlier. And you can also add attachments to each invoice, so if you saved anything in the document section of your admin panel, they'll automatically suggest to attach here. And the attached schedule values will automatically include a spreadsheet with all of the schedule value information you see in this invoice format in case you don't actually use this layout. I'm going to go ahead and close out of that window and pull up the invoice details screen. This is where I can record payment. In the top right corner there's a drop down. This will pull up a window where I just write in how much the client has paid so far, so you can actually record a partial payment if necessary. And just like we saw in our bill screen, I could drop this down and see other actions to perform on the invoice, like editing, closing, view and download will just give us a copy of the document in a PDF. And if I click Manage Invoices at the top of the screen, I can see all of my different outstanding invoices in Knowify. how much has been paid so far, and of course their original balance. And this is also where I can record payment on the higher level. I just click the checkbox on the right hand side of the invoice, and once all of the payment has been recorded, it'll automatically close the invoice for us. And just like before in the bills, I can click show history to see all of my closed invoices to date. So now I'm going to go back to this job that we've been working on. I'm going to use this little recent job shortcut in the top right you may have seen me use. And now that I'm in the summary tab, I actually can see what my current profitability is on this project in both percentage and my dollar figure. It breaks down into revenue, which is billed, how much has been paid. I can see how much was invoiced in taxes, and I can currently see a negative work in progress. This just means that I've invoiced more than I've earned based off of my cost versus budget breakdown. And then in the cost section, we'll be able to see how much we've spent on materials, labor, and subs. And we even differentiate between what you've been billed for in materials and if you have anything that's only outstanding in purchase orders. So everything we've covered so far has been for our contract jobs module, which is great for your longer term projects, but if you do smaller jobs, you might be interested in using our service jobs module. In the service jobs module, you have the ability to create jobs that are just single day tickets rather than creating a full contract to sign with the client. And I'll just create an example here. I'll add a new service job. And you see we can choose a client from the database again. But for this example, I'll say that it's a new client. Maybe this is someone who called in and we don't usually do work for. So this way, while you're on the phone with the client, you can enter their info. This way they'll be able to save them into the client database. And I'll just enter some client info for this person. And we also have a field for you to enter notes. So if it's a new client, you want to just put in some more information about how you got a hold of them or how they got a hold of you. Maybe if you have lead sources, it's a nice place to get some more information on each client. And now I save this client, and I'll start creating my service ticket. And when we're billing our clients, we have two different options for a service ticket. We can either search our service database and create a fixed price ticket. In this situation, I'm using inspection and maintenance. And I can just plug in the price. I can also adjust quantity if necessary, so if it's a list of materials instead of service. But I'm going to call this one time materials, so you can learn a little bit more about our time materials invoicing. Just as a side note, you do have the ability to create longer term time and materials projects using our cost plus contract style and contract jobs, but this service ticket will give you the general idea as well. So when I choose schedule appointment, I get to see who's already booked on jobs today. That way I know not to schedule any of these employees. I'm going to go ahead and schedule myself, and I'm going to bring Ray. And the slider at the top of the screen will let us choose what time we're going to be performing this ticket. And then the last field for service notes is just going to put some more information about the ticket on the smartphone app for any of your field technicians, so you can let them know what they're supposed to be doing. The ticket's being built on the right. You can see that there's a number associated with this one. We'll auto increment the numbers for you, show the address, you can see the appointment time, and clicking create will then add it as a scheduled ticket in your service map. Now that we have this ticket set up, I'm going to show you how to track some time and materials against this, starting in our time tracker. Now when I go to enter time, you see that it automatically pops up this ticket because it's something I'm scheduled on. But I can also pull up the foreman view, like what we had covered earlier. And I put in the ticket number, this 912, and it'll pull up the list of employees scheduled to work on the ticket. In this situation, it's just me and Ray. And I can also include a description of what we did that day. Again, this should be done on the smartphone app as well, but this is just for the sake of example. I'm going to go ahead and approve these hours as well. In a time materials job, we don't actually let you invoice any of the hours until they've been approved. That way no entries submitted by error will end up being invoiced to the client. I'm also going to add a cash expense to this ticket. I'll say it's a Home Depot purchase, throw something in. Just a material for the sake of showing you how the materials will be invoiced. And this is a good example of just showing how we can enter purchases against a job without going through the budget. And you'll see that since I chose a job here, if I click add another line item, it's going to automatically associate that with the same job, so I don't have to re-enter that every time I add a new line item to the purchase. Just a way to save you a little bit of time here. We'll go ahead and hit submit. And now we have time and materials associated with this ticket. So I'm going to come back to my service jobs and mark it as complete. This can also be done from the field via the smartphone app again. And as a side note, you can actually send an email to the client with the appointment details with the notify via email button. And then you may also know that there's a place to enter notes as well as images and then convert this to a contract job to carry over this information into a full-scale project if necessary. But I'll go ahead and just mark this job as complete, and you'll notice that it automatically pulls up the invoice button. So all I have to do is click here, and Knowify will pull in all of the time materials that I have allocated against this job so we can submit an invoice to the client for all of the information. And you can see that the invoice form is pretty similar to what we had with progress invoicing, but it didn't prompt for a percentage. It's just a list of things that I'm going to be invoicing the client for, as well as the rate that we're going to be charging them for it. If we need to edit the way that this is going to be presented on the invoice, I can click the target buttons on the right to group items. I'll create a group for materials and another one for labor. This way it doesn't have to show the detailed breakdown to your client. And we do have some options for auto grouping at the bottom of the invoice form. I'll go ahead and finalize this invoice, and you see that we have the option to attach a time report to this. This is just available when you have a time and materials invoice. It'll take all of the time entries as well as any comments submitted with them, including the time in and time out, and automatically apply this to the back of the invoice to give the client some more information. Now this is going to be logged as an invoice in my account, and just like before, I can record when the client has paid me, and it'll close out this invoice for us. Then, if I ever need to see a record of this ticket, I can come back to Service Jobs and go to my Service History tab, and it'll show me all of my open and closed tickets within a time frame that I set at the top of the screen. I'm going to go ahead and search for ticket 912 here, and we'll see it down here marked as closed and invoiced, and I'll be able to see the profitability of this ticket. Then if I ever need more details, I can click the arrow to the left hand side of the ticket name, and you'll see I have a logs file as well as a documents file for this ticket, an activity feed, just like we saw in our contract jobs, so I could see a breakdown of what went into this ticket, including all of my time, materials, invoices, comments, and image uploads. So far all of our tracking has been against projects that we're doing for clients, but Knowify also has an internal tab where you can set up projects and budgets for any costs that aren't associated with your client projects. These jobs will function very similarly to your contract jobs, only you won't need to set up a contract at any point. You'll just have a plan and track section where you can allocate all of your costs. It's pretty commonly used for things like overhead costs, office time, travel time, and you can choose a department if you have that breakdown in your account. And you'll see, just like before, I still have a plan and track. There's a documents, logs, activity tab, just so you can get all this information. And you still set up phases as you did earlier. You don't need to set up a budget unless you need to track against a budget. I'll set something up, just a general non-job related cost and time on this. I'll enable labor materials. And I'll go ahead and just save this and switch it to active. And now whenever I'm logging cost in Knowify, I'll have the ability to choose this overhead office time project so I can see how much I'm spending in these types of costs. The last thing I'll cover here is our reporting in Knowify. Knowify has a variety of different types of reports that we can generate using all of the data in your account. And you'll see a tab for reports in most of your modules just to see what's available. Plus, we also have a specific module for reports where you can see all of the different reports that we run summarized into one grouping here, so you don't need to search around through the system. You can see that we have options available for service jobs, timesheets, task management, purchases, but I'll come to my contract job section and just run a report as an example. I always like to show the advanced jobs report, and it asks for a date range. This will run across every job that's been started in that date range. So it's not every job that's been active in that range as much as when you set it up in Knowify. It'll create an Excel sheet for us. And once I have this open, you'll see that we have separate tabs for bidding, active, closed, and rejected. And each of these tabs will summarize the list of jobs that fit this description, broken down into job name, client, all of your contract info, and the amount that you've invoiced. It also summarizes the amount changed in change orders and gives you your current work in progress number. and I get to see all of my labor, material, and subcontractor cost to date versus our budgets, how much is remaining in our budget, and our current profitability on the project. So that's just about everything I wanted to cover with this video. It was all very high level, and if you have more specific questions, you can always reach out to us at support@knowify.com, and we're happy to help. And we can send more detailed guides on how to perform different actions in Knowify, as well as more specific videos. And if you'd like to explore on your own, in the admin panel, you have the option to view our user documentation and manual, as well as our full list of video tutorials available on YouTube. Aside from all of this, Knowify does offer free customer support and training, so if there's anything else we could do to help you out, feel free to reach out to us at support@knowify.com, and we're happy to spend some time to work with you. Thanks, and have a nice day.